Hey there, this lesson is going to be a quick run through of the setup and how we're going to be presenting the upcoming lessons. I'm going to be using an editor on the left hand side, that's brackets, you can see it open over here. We've got default HTML here linking to a file called app.js, and this is where all the JavaScript is going to go, all the magic is going to happen within app.js, and we're going to leave the HTML basic with just the HTML, the head, the title, the body, and then linking to our script.js file. And the editor that I am using is brackets, and the nice thing about brackets is it's got this neat feature called live preview, which lets me open up the web page within an IP address, so I don't have to run a server, and I can simulate running a server locally on my machine just by installing brackets. There's no anything else that needs to be done, and just click the live preview and you can open it up. And by default, if you are familiar with some of the courses that I've done earlier, a lot of times I'll just run the JavaScript using the file protocol. So I'll locate the file on my computer system and open that up. And in this case, because this is an API connection, I do prefer using the HTTP protocol. And the big difference here is that you're not going to see file here because it's no longer using the file protocol to connect to the web page. And that's all done through brackets. And if you have nodes set up, or if you have a live server set up, or XAMPP, or any other ways that you can run a local machine on your computer, you're ready to go. And if not, then I would suggest that you use an editor for this course using something like brackets, or there's a few other ones that will let you run the live preview as well. And I'm also using Chrome as my browser of choice, and for Chrome I'm going to be accessing the developer tools. So that is available if you open up Chrome. Every version of Chrome will have it, as well as most of the other browsers will have some form of developer tools. So you can go to the three dots and you can go to more tools, developer tools, or you can also use a shortcut. And of course, the shortcut is going to be different depending on if you're on a Mac or on a Windows machine. And in this case, I happen to be on a Mac, but the console is going to open up the same way. And by default, if you're wondering what this error is, I do get sometimes some questions about what the error is. And this is just the first run error. If you don't have an icon, a fav icon within your root directory, then it's going to throw that error. But when you refresh, that error will be gone. So we are ready to run some JavaScript, and this is the console that we're going to be using quite a bit, where we're going to be getting data before we output it within the visible area. So anything that we're doing, we're going to usually pull it into the console first, and especially when we make our DOM connections, and output it. So very important that you do have the ability to access the console, and that's why I do suggest you use Chrome as well for this lesson. And also, we're going to be connecting to an API, and the API that we're connecting to, and for all those Star Wars fans, this is the API for you, because this is the Star Wars API. So this is an open API, and you can get information about planets, spaceships, vehicles, people, films, species. There's a lot of information here, and this is a great place to practice and get more familiar with making API connections. And then after the course, you can experiment as well, making connections and getting the people or the starships. And in this case, we're going to focus on the planets. And as you can see, when you do get the planet result, when you do the request, so this is the URL to get the planet API, and you can make the request so you can try this out. And you're going to get all of that information represented within a JSON format. And then the JSON format is the one that we're going to utilize, again, to pull it back into our web page. So how about we get into the JavaScript, because I know that's what you're here for. So opening up the app.js, so I'm going to close my side window and write some code. So the first thing I'd like to do is set up the URL where we're making our connection. So this is the Star Wars API, swappy.co/API, and then what you want to get back from the API. So in this case, we want to get back planets. And I'm also going to be showing you how you can retrieve back multiple pages as well and put it all within one object. So nice, neat way to do that. So now that we've got our URL, we're going to use fetch in order to make a connection to the API. So setting up a function in order to handle that, and we can just call that fetch data, or whatever we want to call it. And it's going to take in one parameter, which is the URL. And in this case, for now, we're not going to take in any parameters right now. We're just going to use the URL because we've set it within the root. And we're using the fetch method in JavaScript. So this is a newer way for those of you that aren't familiar with it. If you might be familiar with making AJAX with XHR requests, then this is actually a more versatile way and a newer way across the newer browsers. And what we're doing is we're making that request and we're waiting for the response. And you can console log out the response information. So let's go over to HTTP protocol and we'll type in fetch data. So we'll run this function. And so go ahead and open up your browser, type in fetch data, and you might have to wait a little bit for the response to come in. And as you can see, the response came in. We've got a status of 200, so that means that everything is A-OK. We did get the response back, and this is within a JSON format, JSON data. So on this first request, we're returning it back. So we want to break that apart a little bit, and this is our option where we've got the response JSON. So typically what we do is we make the request, and then we return on this request, we return the response information, and we know it's coming back as JSON, and then we add another promise, and then this is the promise where we're actually going to handle the data that's come in within a JavaScript object format, and now we can console log out data, and you should see the data being returned back. So let's try that one more time. So fetch data, wait a little bit for the promise to be delivered. So it's making the connection, and you see you get this count back, and you get all of the information here. So you've got all of the results. And then, of course, you can loop through the results and output the results and use those results. So that's how you make your fetch request to the API. And coming up next, we're going to work a little bit more with this. We're going to iterate through the results and output them on the page and do some fun stuff with JavaScript. So go ahead, try this out. Make sure that you've got your editor open. You can copy and paste the source code and connect to the Star Wars API. And you can be ready to move on to the next lesson where we have some fun with the data in the API.